Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Natasha and I am part of the BorrowBox team. I am here in Melbourne and it is my absolute honour to be talking to Colm Tóibín, who is in London today. And I know that we have lots of you going to be watching us and this really incredible interview from Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Wales and Ireland. It's going to be an absolute thrill to talk to Colm today about his new book, the news from Dublin, as well as his writing. The first half, we're going to be talking together, the two of us, and then we're going to turn over to you to ask your questions. And that is going to be an opportunity for Colm to ask what you want to know about his writing. You can do that via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. And just a reminder that we are recording this session and it will go up on our YouTube channel in about 2 weeks, so you can listen to it again or enjoy it with friends who haven't been able to join us today. I just want to informally introduce our guest. Colm Tóibín was born in Enniscorthy in 1955. He's the author of 11 novels, including The Master, Brooklyn, The Magician, and 2 collections of short stories. His most recent novel, Long Island, was an immediate top 10 bestseller in both Ireland and the UK on publication, and he's been 3 times shortlisted for the Booker Prize. In 2021, he was awarded the David Cohen Prize for Literature, and he was awarded the Laureate for Irish Fiction 2022 to 2024. And of course, now we have the new 3rd short story collection, The News from Dublin, which a lot of you will be familiar with because you've downloaded it on your BorrowBox, which is your free library app that you can get in audiobook as well as ebook. It is just such a thrill to be talking to you today. Welcome, Colm.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Natasha.
So I just wanted to say that one of the things I've noticed with a couple of the authors that we've been talking to over the last couple of years is that they have come from a background in journalism. So last month we spoke to the Australian writer Trent Dalton, and near the end of last year we spoke to the British thriller writer Tim Logan, who were both journalists and then moved into writing, which indeed yourself you had done. And I just wondered what drew you from that world in the reporting world to the fiction world, and does that kind of inform your fiction writing in any way, perhaps in the early years or to current day?
Yeah, I think it does. When I started in journalism, it was easy to keep a magazine going in Dublin, which it isn't now. And a lot of us who worked on those magazines were writing what's now called long form journalism, and we were taking our bearings in a way from those American writers like Norman Mailer, like Tom Wolfe, like Joan Didion, trying to write big long pieces of which was factual reporting, but shaping it and having interesting openings and interesting endings and trying to make it look like a piece of fiction, although it was a piece of nonfiction. So I never worked as a news reporter, but I think it's hard because over a few years it would bring your prose down to sort of really as lack of style is really what you're working towards. But I was doing the opposite, and the advantage of it, I suppose, is that you're writing for readers, and you're writing for the idea that someone is now going to read this. And the reason I'm writing it is not for something to satisfy anything in me. I'm not writing for myself. You know, a lot of writers could say, "Oh, I write for myself." Well, I don't, and that, in a way, that lesson was learned from journalism.
And it's probably the idea of where you're writing succinctly, probably to a word limit for an article in journalism. It probably lends itself to then what we would find with a short story, although the variety in this collection, some of them are quite short and then others are quite much more expanded, almost like a novella.
Yeah, that I think that with the great advantage in a way of writing fiction is that there's no one to tell you we only have space for 500 words,
That's right.
or if we have to take 1,000 words out of it because a big ad has come in.
Yeah.
There's a love. I think there is a difference, and it's a lovely, in a way, leisure thing where no, you can go as long as you like. What's a novella? A novella is a short story that's just gone on too long.
Well, I don't think that the Catalan Girls goes on. Although that was one of my favorites in the book. It comes right at the end of the collection for those that aren't familiar with it yet. There's 9 stories in this one. And obviously we have a mixture of new and previously published stories. Indeed, your first short story collection was Mothers and Sons over 2 decades ago, and then The Empty Family back in 2010. So what keeps drawing you back to this form? And are you ever kind of tempted to make changes to ones that you've previously published?
Not really. Once it's there, it sort of stands. You might, if you found a mistake, for example, there's a story in this book called Five Bridges, which was in the New Yorker, which is famous for its fact checking. Well, it didn't find the mistake that a friend found because it's set on a certain day, which is the Saturday before Trump's second inauguration. And he says the moon over the Pacific was not waning, it was waxing. And I should know that because he and so I made that change between the magazine publication and the book publication. But in general, once something is in a book, I don't rewrite.
Well, I'm sure your friend is very happy that you made that change that they pointed out.
I acknowledged him at the back of the book. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's nice. Is your approach to writing a short story quite different in terms of your daily practice than compared to writing a novel or a theatre script?
Well, it's the same as a novel in that something is in your mind.
Mm,
It could be a configuration of characters, it could be a drama, it could be just a place, but you have a story in your head. And that moves almost of its own accord into rhythm. In other words, you get a sentence. And you might get a first paragraph. And that comes like inspiration. You feel an urge one day to write that down. And you think,
mm,
oh, here it is. Now, what you must do with that is make it perfect. Perfect being that you don't want to make any more changes in it. So you could have a month or two where you would look at it every so often. It's in longhand. You could cross it out, write it again. You put it on a laptop, look at it in print, change words, or even just cut something completely and start again. And then when that's done, you can work. You can leave it for a year and go back to it and finish it. And it could be a novel or it could be a story. If it's a story, what you need sometimes, there are three stories written when I knew the book was coming out and I knew I needed them to be finished. And what I would do is I would leave a week where that week is for that story to be finished. And because of um, the beginning is written, therefore it's just work. It really is just get the story written. You
mm,
don't wait for inspiration a second time. It was there, you have it. And what you need to do now is work. With a novel, you can't, a week could be nothing.
mm.
Although you can work chapter by chapter, instead of thinking about the novel, you think about each individual episode. But then with the story, the question then becomes finish this story. It doesn't mean it won't need work later, but it needs to be got down. And the only way to do that is to leave days completely free for that purpose.
And are you aware of where the story might go when you get that initial idea and where what the ending is that you're kind of driving towards? Or is that kind of opening itself to you through those days and weeks that you might be writing a short story or a novel?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty controlled. I actually do know what I'm doing in the sense I know where the story is going. The problem is that sometimes if you're avoiding confrontation in a story, and a good number of these stories seem to be reaching towards a big argument or a row or some sort of major confrontation, I don't go there in the story, and I know I'm not going to go there. The question is then, it really is exploring how delicate can you be in avoiding that. In other words, a boy he's caught stealing in school, he's expelled, and he's going home, he's meeting his parents.
Mm,
I don't want his father to start shouting at him because everything the father will say is a sort of cliche. You brought disgrace on this house, you should be ashamed of yourself. All those things are sort of cliches. What if the father said nothing? What if the
mm.
father looked at him and was sort of embarrassed? And so you have to, so you know that even though you're trying to get that, it's a delicate process. It's a lot about the half said thing, the almost said thing, the silence, the moment where something could be said, and you're moving towards that, which involves a lot of very careful addition, erasure, addition, just to see if you could bring the story to an end.
I love the way that you play around with that said and unsaid, particularly that space that is between the silence and the action, what's going on in the interior mind, of characters that we probably know well in Brooklyn and Long Island. But in these stories, the same thing happens as well. Particularly, I'm thinking of Summer of 38, where she has to make a decision. Is she going to see her past love? And that idea that some of these characters, even though they might be lonely, even though they might be longing for something, they actually do take action. They're not just passive. And we see that in their minds.
Yeah, in Summer of 38, she could see an old lover, and the story really is building up to that. And what I'm going to do all the time is no, she's not going to see him. but
Mm,
she is going to do something else that day. She's going to see her daughter, and the reader knows that the ex-lover is around the corner in a restaurant waiting for her, and the reader is following the story, but there's no mention of this other scene. And so you're working all the time with that idea. The reader knows more than the characters almost, and
mm,
yeah, yeah, but it's a question of not overdoing that, not saying she decided she would not go to the restaurant. That's not a sentence I can use. I have to build it so that that is not a decision. She just lets the 2 hours go by that she
mm.
could be in the restaurant. She lets them go by and then they're over. And then for a moment, she stands on the street in case the lover is going to go by in a car. And it's just a few minutes. That's quite a lot.
Mm.
And then she goes back into her house and then there's nothing.
Her self-control is incredible. I mean, I don't know if I would have the same self-control not to
Me
kind of make
either.
it.
I would I would go to the window and look in to see
I
what it looked like.
what do they look like now? And
Yeah.
yeah. Your first book was obviously published back in 1990. I mean, for a writer of such longevity, I'm just fascinated to know if your inspiration is always coming to you in the same way, a lived experience, a memory, or is it changing like from an image, from a title, from a character, or a conversation you have with someone in the street?
It doesn't get easier. I'm trying to write a novel at the moment. And when I say I'm trying to write a novel, meaning every so often I go, as I described, and write an opening. The problem this time is that none of them is any good. Like they're just not any good. And how I know they're no good is I read them in the morning, and this is just no good. And it's worrying because you keep going with it and think, is there some way into this book? I can't force it, meaning I can't write a page and just say, this is the opening and I'm going to carry on from here because
Mm.
that won't work. And even the other day, I started again, and no, no, absolute rubbish, 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 rubbish. And it's worrying. And I suppose maybe it's not as worrying because I just know it's rubbish. If I didn't know it was rubbish, that would be really worrying.
Yeah.
But so that you trying to find your way in. And the problem is that I have no more stories on the go. I've used up all the stories that I had been drafting and thinking about. So I'm stuck now that if this thing doesn't get right, I don't know what I'm going to do. But the thing is to keep going at it and keep thinking that no, it's not just that it's not just that the writing is wrong. It's that the approach is wrong. The way in is wrong. So the whole idea is wrong. Not
Mm.
the idea for the book, but the idea for how it should open, where it should open. And it's slow, and when I'm doing it slow, it's clunky, it's awkward, and it's everything I'm opposed to. And the hope is that someday I will have another approach, another way into it, another style for the opening, and then I will get going on it.
I think that that's just really good advice for writers who are maybe feeling a sense of writer's block, that it's about perhaps coming at it from a different angle, that you don't just keep trying, to sort of uh, to kind of flog the thing that's not actually working and to think about another alternative.
Yeah, just scrap, cut, erase. And I'm not sure, maybe coffee, maybe a good bit long walk, listening to music, listening to some music you haven't listened to for ages, reading poetry, going for a run if you're a runner, playing tennis, but like something that's almost to do with controlling your breath, that getting your so that you feel fit and your breathing is good, and out of that breath maybe you get a sort of naturalness in the way the sentence would work. I mean, just think about if you wrote a sentence, the opening of Kafka's The Trial, someone must have been telling lies about Joseph K. I just go, oh my God, someone must have been telling lies about Joseph K. And there's an Irish novelist, John McGahern, who has his novel Amongst Women. He goes, as he weakened, Moran became afraid of his daughters.
Well, there's a few
And
fathers that might be nodding their heads right now. I'm not sure. Yeah.
yeah, so that, those sort of first sentences, um, if you could just get one of them. But what I'm thinking about more is the first paragraph that mightn't
Mhm.
have as a resting and opening, but nonetheless, that's the state I'm in at the moment.
So we were talking offline, and I briefly said to you that my way into your work was actually through Nora Webster back in 2014 when I was running a bookshop, and we had 3 book clubs doing that book. A great conversation. Completely loved her as a character. And then imagine my delight when I went back to Brooklyn And she gets a little cameo and then forward into Long Island, and there she is again. And now in the news from Dublin, what is it about Nora and her family that actually has you keeping to return to her?
Because it's very close to my own family.
Mhm.
And so it's not, I mean, it is, I mean, I did invent certain things in Northern Webster, but other things are absolutely the case.
Mhm.
And so the, therefore, I had a memory of a thing, Ash Wednesday. You're meant to have ashes on your forehead, especially in the 60s, 50s, and 60s.
Oh.
And that's a memory. So I started the story with a memory, and that memory is of my parents. And so it was much easier to call them Nora Webster than to think of a new name for them. And also, I don't know, there's a funny mischief in it where characters that are fictional characters are brought into the next book as though they somehow were real in some other life. And I think there are a few times that happens in um, in the news from Dublin. I think there's another story where there are characters from other books. And I think I'm going to do more of that.
I really love the cameos because I think people who have followed your work for such a long period of time get that little thrill that they can see the little connecting point. And for me, with the news from Dublin, which was, the incredible story of Morris, who's kind of going to the Department of Health and his brother's got TB, it kind of brought us back to a time period before Nora Webster when she,
Yeah.
become a widow. So you're kind of playing around with time there, which I loved.
Yes, I am. I'm sort of going as a sort of preview of the book, and I do get a sort of pleasure out of that. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we all do.
Also, there's a story called The Sum of Money, and if you look carefully, there's a character in it who's in the boarding school, and he's he's called Donald Webster, and he's the son.
I
So
don't
he makes a
I
little
made that
appearance. He
connection.
makes a little
Oh,
appearance.
oh, that's
Yeah,
nice. Nice little nugget,
in A
Jim.
Sum of
Oh,
Money. Yeah, yeah.
oh, that's beautiful. Okay, yeah, I can see people will be going, oh, that's a nice little nugget, Jim. Or you may be able to tell us that you already noticed that little detail, which is excellent. Obviously, the playing around with time, these stories travel from sort of the 1950s to the present day. And then geographically, we're going from Dublin, but we're also in Spain, we're in Argentina, we're in Texas, we're in, an Irishman in America. What does this sense of exile come from, whether it's chosen or not for these characters? Is it linked to you perhaps living abroad and being able to see your homeland through a different lens?
Yeah, that in other words, I drifted into. I mean, I went to Spain when I was 20, and
Mm.
so I got to miss Ireland, and then I came back to Ireland and I got to miss Spain. There's no satisfaction once you start doing this. There's no satisfactory conclusion. You often, if I hear a bit of Catalan music, I'm back there. I'm all nostalgic. I'm all raw, and it happens in. I spend a living in California a lot, and my partner hears me putting on some Irish song at night and says, "Oh my God, you're going to go into that sad mode. You're going to be all sad now." And
It can be
so
brooding.
and then you get the flight home, and you suddenly turn up in the airport and you see all these Irish people, and you feel really at home. And you're glad to see everybody, and then you arrive home. And you think, "Oh my God, it was raining all day, and I wish I was back in California." So, I mean, some of it is that. It's also oddly enough, it coincides with the sort of history of Ireland that, the last 150 since the famine, people have left. And I understand there are great numbers of Irish people in Western Australia. And I think Irish people love Australia.
Well,
And
indeed, Dervla McTiernan, who's a well-known author, is Irish and now
yeah,
lives in Western Australia. And we had a conversation with her last year. So, it is that idea of being an Irish expat in Australia is very well known here.
yeah, I mean, in these stories about exile, I've been trying not to do about a writer in exile and stuff. So, the in Five Bridges, he's a plumber,
Mm.
and then the Catalan girls they're Catalans in Argentina, and then when they go back to Catalonia, they miss Argentina, and so there are a good number of different, I suppose, trajectories in this book. But the idea of homecoming. As leaving is fine. It's an anecdote. He left. He
Mm.
missed home when he went there. But the homecoming is the real story because you've
Mm.
got all the complexities and ambiguities around where you now belong, where your clothes are, where your CDs are, where
Mm.
your bank account is, and so you end up living not necessarily in two places, but in neither, and that for me is a story I can work with that.
And I think that's hard for Paul, who is the character in that Five Bridges you mentioned, because he wasn't to know when he didn't apply to sort of get his status confirmed in America, having come from Ireland. But then he has a daughter. And now when he's having to leave, it's the idea that he's actually leaving, something really significant and how he might not be able to be part of her life in the same way.
Yeah, I think for all of us who wandered out of our, drifted out of Ireland or deliberately left, it's fine at the beginning, it's fine when you're young, it's fine in
Mm,
your 20s. But the problem begins when you start waiting for the phone call from home
mm,
to say, one of your parents is sick and you should come home. And
yeah,
you've got to say to them, I can only come once. Should I come now or should I come for the funeral? What will I do?
yeah.
If it's Australia, it's so far. Even if it's California, it's very far.
Mm, mm,
Problem then is you're not thinking of putting down roots, and then you fall in love,
mm.
and then the girl or the boy is in and then you have kids, and then you suddenly your life is more or less constricted or circumscribed and defined, and that's a story.
And I think I said to you that, when I was in Ireland with my best friend, we would meet her future husband at a pub in Galway, and then becomes that decision, are they going to live in Ireland, which he was originally, he's from Dublin, or they're going to return to Australia, and all exactly what you're talking about. So, and now, being Gen Xers, there is that thing where you face about family and those decisions about how many times will you return. Um, Talking about the longing and the loneliness, why do you think that's a strong motif that you keep returning to?
I think it's very hard to write about happiness. You could write one story about it. People would get fed up if you
Mhm.
said, that you fell in love and everything was fine, you were completely content and the sex was good and the money was fine and the sunshine was lovely. And where's the story? Give me a story. Tell me something.
Yeah.
And so you move into the same ways that certain songs are all about longing and love. Love. If you've love, you must have longing. If you've
Mm,
love, you must have lost love. If
yeah.
you've love, you must have worry about love. And so, yeah, I think the natural tendency for anyone who's writing a story is to find a problem, to find a sort of moment where happiness is possible, but it didn't happen. Something
Yeah.
else happened. And so that you're working all the time in areas around, I suppose, disappointment, something that didn't happen, how
Mm,
the years went by. One of the strange things that I can never get enough of, is being really dramatized how the years went by.
mm,
How it got to be 71. How did that happen? And what does it mean?
mm,
And how the possibilities are narrowing. And that is either a comedy, but it's not usually a comedy. It's usually quite sad. And so, if you're writing stories, my tendency always is to find a problem or to find a sadness or to find a melancholy, and sort of work with that. I suppose just that the other side of the things won't work fully.
mm.
People's contentment is not a great story.
I think that's why people really love your work, because I think they're sort of seeing they might have, issues or decisions or choices in their own life. And then they're kind of seeing how some people kind of become kind of paralyzed by having to make a decision, or where they kind of play with both of the options that are around. I mean, in the journey to Galway, I mean, the mum whose son has died in World War I as a soldier, she has that kind of decision about what is she going to do with this information. And I think, we can put ourselves into those shoes, potentially not in the same circumstance, but in some other decision that we're making. I think that that's what it really resonates with the human experience of all of us.
Yeah, I mean that story is based on the diaries and autobiographies of Lady Gregory, whose son Robert was killed in 1918. And what I was trying to do was enter into her mind and move very slowly towards with ideas of shock, sort of before grief. What happens? The mind slows down. She starts to almost console herself with various thoughts as the telegram comes, and she's to bring the telegram. She's to take the telegram, so the telegram is death, and take it on two trains to see her daughter-in-law and hand her the telegram.
Mm.
And my job is, as working very slowly, is to what happens. She doesn't speak. What happens in her mind? doing those two train journeys,
Mm.
and to try and find a sort of true way of saying that this is her postponing real feeling by having these thoughts, and but yet, you realize it's the mind in a state of shock.
And we get a real portrait too of him as a person from her point of
Yeah.
view, from the wife's point of view. He's not completely perfect and he has maybe a flaw there, which it makes it more intriguing as a story.
Yeah, I think that any of us, especially blokes, I don't know if it's the same with girls as much, but with blokes, when you go home, when I would come down on the train from Dublin to Enniscorthy and I'm there for the weekend and I'm 19, there's a sort of swagger involved. Everything's fine in Dublin. There's no problem in Dublin. I'm swaggering around and I just know that my aunt or my mother's watching me thinking, are you okay?
Mm.
Is there something? And you're no, everything's fine, and like you could be you haven't opened a book for a week. You could have like just not be going to a class or something, and like there's the last thing you need him to know. So in other words, when she sees him coming back from the war for a short respite, she sees he's all swagger, and she doesn't believe it for a moment.
Yeah, I love that, an idea of a child who is, it's a parent's eternal job, I suppose, to always be caring about their children and whether the children think that they're being able to pull the wool over their eyes of their parents or not. I mean, that's the kind of funny thing about it.
Yeah.
Obviously, your books have been turned into audio books, and you've had some fantastic narrators. Meryl Streep narrating The Testament of Mary, recent Oscar winner Jessie Buckley voicing Long Island. Long Island is my favorite of yours. I just loved where that story went after such a long period of time. How did that come about? How involved do you get in his audiobook, sort of something that you like as a form?
Um, I did a few myself. It's hard work. I did. A Long Winter, which is the novella. I did that myself, and I did the book of essays, A Guest at the Feast. This time round with the news from Dublin, there were two actors I particularly wanted, and I wanted for good reasons. One that I had worked in the theatre with Dervla Crotty. She played Lady Gregory. She played two characters in a play I wrote, and there was a long rehearsal period, and I really enjoyed. I thought she was brilliant and I love her voice. And I always thought I'd like to work with Dervla again. So when this came up, especially with the opening story of Lady Gregory, but also the Catalan girls at the end, I thought Dervla is a great actress and she'll do this brilliantly. And so she did. And then someone made a short film of a story of mine called A Song, and they used an actor called Dara Shannon. He's a young actor, and I thought just his voice, I could work with that. And I thought it'd be great to get Dara into this. That he would, I thought he would be brilliant, and so he was too. So it was great getting two, I suppose, theatre actors. I mean, we had Jessie Buckley, who's better known as a film actor, but for these stories, there's something more intimate about them that I thought we don't need sort of Oscar winners as much as Irish theatre actors who everyone really admires.
Yeah, I felt like we really got into the headspace and particularly like for we were talking before about the mother in the journey to Galway. Like we get into her kind of into her inner monologue, and it's sort of beautifully spoken. And for those of you who haven't listened to the audio and you've read the book, I would encourage you to go and listen to the audio book as well, because I mean, there's something about that Irish, sensibility that you have in your writing, and then the Irish, just being spoken to you, even from just a pronunciation kind of point of view, sometimes when you're not familiar, perhaps over here in Australia or New Zealand. I know we've got people in New Zealand watching tonight as well. Um, and then I guess for me is that sense, well, with Jessie Buckley, though, she did such a range of voices, like I mean, you gave her a hard challenge. There was the different ages, there's the different accents, it's not just one
Yeah.
character. So I
Yeah.
mean, that I just thought she did with such aplomb, really.
Yeah, and Fiona Shaw with Nora Webster did all the
Oh,
different women voices, and
love.
yes, I've been lucky with that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lovely idea that someone goes into a studio. The problem in the studio, you probably know this, is that you're doing the audiobook and you think you're doing great, and then your tummy rumbles, and then the producer has to come in to say, "Hey, your tummy is rumbling." You know what? My tummy's not. I go, but it's got the microphone for an audio. It picks up everything. If you
So
turn, if
sensitive.
you rustle the page, it comes in. You rust, or your shirt is rustling, or your glasses. You made a sound, and so
Yeah.
you really. I mean, you really. It's
It's a lot
it's
of concentration. Yeah.
it's really really hard work. Yeah.
It's a skill. It's a real skill to be a voice narrator. I
Yeah.
heard that you actually came to reading late as a child, and I'm not sure what it was that eventually got you into reading, but I wondered about your experience with libraries as a young child and perhaps now, as a writer. Of course, this is a library event for all of our libraries that are in Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and Ireland. Um, what's been your experience of libraries from your younger days to perhaps present day?
Um, it's one of the great things that's happened in Ireland. The government has really invested a huge amount of money in building new libraries. So the best new buildings in the country are the new libraries. And when I was laureate for fiction, I did an event every month in one of the libraries. And again, you have that idea of the librarians as people who have not just, the business of a library is a place where you borrow books is sort of over. The library is a center for people to come who are interested in reading, and the job of the librarian is to create a great rich space for that. And but I had a really important life-changing experience when I was, I think, 17. I was going to go to university, and I had it in my head that I wanted to study philosophy. And there was a lot of discussion about this. What do you do with a philosophy degree? And I was maybe going to do English and philosophy. And then say, well, that wouldn't be enough. You want to be a teacher, they would want you to have two subjects, and no one teaches philosophy. And what's this philosophy anyway? And then I got it into my head then that I should go and find out about philosophy. So I went down to the library in Wexford, which is about 10 miles away, and Miss Lucking was a librarian there, and she was great, and Anna Drury. They were the two great librarians there. And I told them what my problem was. And they said, look, what you should do is just over the next few weeks, this was, we'll give you the basic books in philosophy, like Plato onwards and Descartes, um, and you can take them all home. And I took them all home, and I thought they were awful. I really thought they were really boring. And I thought it was tedious, and I couldn't get anything from them at all. And all the things I thought would be there weren't there. And there were theorems, and there were, like Descartes, and I just no, no. I realized that I wasn't interested in philosophy at all. I liked the word philosophy, but the actual reading of the books, there was no one, none of them had, none of them did anything for me. So luckily, I gave up the idea, and I've never really been interested in philosophy ever since. I know I should be, and sometimes I like some of this. I like some of the sentences, Wittgenstein, whereof we cannot speak, thereof we must be silent. And I am, therefore I think, or I think, is it I am, therefore I think, or I think, therefore I am? But it's one or the other anyway.
Yep.
And but it was a lovely thing because complete disillusion. It probably saved me a year or 2 years where I would have gone in and done it and become absolutely, and got fed up and failed it and got D's and F's in it and stuff. Miss Drury and Miss Lucking in Wexford County Council, in working for the county council as librarians, saved me all the trouble that I would have got. They just got me out of philosophy by giving me philosophy books to read. I realized I much prefer short stories and novels.
Well, and then it probably led to a career in writing. So we have those librarians to thank for that. I want to turn over to some audience questions now. So if you have a question, please feel free to submit via the Q&A button. And we would love if you could tell us which library you are dialing in from, because it's really great to know where everyone is watching. And if you're in a library group that's just watching and you don't have a question, just let us know where you're watching. We'd just love to read out a few of those statements as well. So, Colm, I loved Vinegar Hill, and that collection took you years to compile. Do you think you'll be publishing more of your poetry? Thank you for all your great writing.
I have half a book of poetry ready. I saw the editor a few years ago, and he said, "You have half a book." The problem is, I still have half a book. In the last year, I've probably written two or three poems, but no more than that. So I don't know what's going to happen because the pandemic was really good for me. In other words, I settled down. I really got quite a lot of work done, and the poems came much easier, as though somehow the idea of being sort of locked in a space that you can't do that business I was always doing of half going home and coming back again and going home, being an American, being you were just there in California in a house where you couldn't go out much, and that was good for the poems. It was bad in other ways, but it was good for the poems. And but I can't depend on that coming again. You know, I don't want it to come again, but I want the poems. So I'm good. I think what I'm going to do is I'm thinking of just getting a lot of time and looking at a lot of photographic books,
Okay.
just images of anything, just
Mm.
black and white photographs, and just turning the page. That's my dream that I'm going to spend a week just turn the page, and anything at all, any word that comes into my head, I'll write down and see where that will take me. But I have half a book. It's no use half a book. You need a book.
We'll get there. Patricia says it's really interesting about your novels and stories. And I read The Magician, and I wonder how long the research took before that was written. It had a great impact on me. And I think of the scenes within it almost daily. Thank you for writing such a wonderful book.
The thing about researching a novel is you could go on researching forever and you could tell everybody I'm researching my novel. And the answer is, well, where is your novel? And so I did a lot of, uh, I knew a lot of it before because I'd written big, long book reviews of all the books that came out about Thomas Mann over the previous decade. So I knew the shape of the story.
Hmm.
And the real question was just write it, just stop researching. But on a given day, you could wake up and you could see what Thomas Mann, what letter he wrote, what story he wrote, where his daughter was, where his son was, that you could, and then you could just start. And the main thing every day was to write something rather than research something. And often, if you needed a fact, you could go to biography and find it. But what I was trying to do was do an immersion for the reader, create the illusion that you're in the room or you're in his mind. So it's all about immersion and illusion, and you can't really research those if you're trying to imagine them all in a room together. Who's saying what?
Mm.
And the question was to get the dialogue, even though it's dialogue from 100 years ago in a foreign language. What do you do with that? And what I did with it was I ignored that idea and I made it into sort of the clipped dialogue you get in Hemingway or Fitzgerald in the 1920s and see where that would take me. And but the main thing about writing is you've got to write, and you could research forever and feel very comfortable. You'd have no book.
Exactly. And we can't all be in the room where it happened, as Hamilton might say. Uh, Someone has said, you mentioned being fact checked by the New Yorker, but even then I couldn't find the error about the moon phase in one of your stories. I can't stop myself from fact checking any fiction that I read. And I found the Catalan Girls a very pleasant surprise in that respect. The story of the Catalan women who live between Spain and Argentina, written by an Irish person. Being Argentinian myself, I couldn't find any factual gap or hole, and it felt so natural. Have you lived in Argentina? And if not, how did you get the factual parts so right? That's a
Um,
lovely compliment.
yeah, yeah, I went to Buenos Aires in 1985, and over the years, I haven't been there for a while now, but there's a house where one of the sisters lives in the outskirts in San Isidro, outside Buenos Aires, and I lived in that house. Um, and the walk describes all the guards at the gates and the dogs and all the posh people living behind walls. And having little garden houses, houses, granny flats, as it were, and so I certainly lived there, and yeah, all the business of Buenos Aires, I would have walked those streets, and I know those streets. And then the trajectory is to Catalonia, and I would certainly have taken that flight. And the place in the Pyrenees is where I go every year. And the house they go to, the village of Bourg is a real village, and that festival they go to is a real festival. That house they have the supper in is a real house. When they come out of the house and look at the festival, it's me standing there watching. As the band plays and as people are in their summer clothes, and so there's so much of it, of the topography,
Mm.
that's me. And I was in Mexico in San Miguel de Allende, and I went to see an American photographer who lives there, and she's a very eccentric, tall woman, and she spent a fortune on doing up this house. It was all tiles and all glass bricks and everything. It was massive space, and but she showed me under the stairs where her maid lived, and there were two little chairs and a little TV, and she said, "This is where I'm happiest. We just sit in the evening and watch TV, the two of us." And I put that straight in the Catalan Girls. So there's a
Oh,
whole lot of stuff like that that's in the story that's out of life, as it were.
nice. Janet says, I've read most of your books and I listened to most of them on audio. I love the sound of the prose. Do you read your drafts aloud to gauge the rhythm of your words?
Never.
Hmm. Okay. Jack says, do you think that commercially there is a future in this style of beautiful and short storytelling? I'm an aspiring or inspired writer.
Um, People say that short stories are not what people want, that people want a novel. And I can see the reason is that you invest so much emotionally in a character that's emerging on the page, and you want this to go on for a whole book. I mean, if Pride and Prejudice were just a short story, you think, oh my God, no, I want to know what else happens to all these people.
Mm.
And so that's the common wisdom. But I just write the stories and see what happens. Just it's a form, it's there, it's available, and it'd be a pity not to use it.
Rebecca, who is saying she loved reading Long Island and then Brooklyn. She did the reverse, I know.
Ah.
I noticed that the four matriarchs are silently and not so silently controlling Ailish. She submits, the men submit. How did you become so aware of this dynamic in women's lives?
You mean it being controlled of it? Well, I suppose Eilish comes from a sort of literary tradition as much as from that there's so many novels that are so good about a young woman who's not in charge, who's not in control of her own life, who's in the shadows. Jane Austen does it in, say, Mansfield Park. Henry James does it in Washington Square. That the reader becomes alert to the young woman's feelings, which are submerged, which are her withheld. She doesn't assert herself, and with that, then you can start working with a very deep levels of feeling and a
Mm.
consciousness that's alert and watchful, but that doesn't necessarily make a lot of noise or isn't very colorful. And so I suppose I'm working out of that idea.
Mm. Again, it's that silence and action kind of contrast. Megan is from the Blue Mountains in New South Wales in Australia. When you wrote Brooklyn, did you already know that you would revisit the story with Long Island?
No, absolutely not. Totally not. It was the
Mm.
last thing I thought of. And if there really had been a revisiting it, I would have been tempted to do it in the immediate aftermath of Brooklyn. In other words, the next 20 years, say that when she settles down, goes to live on Long Island, they get a house, they have the kids, that all of that could have been there. But it's not dramatic. There's nothing really I can do with it. And in a way, the reader can imagine that. But then I got the idea for the opening of Long Island, but it was 13 or 14 years later. It was the last thing I was expecting.
Mm. Jim. Julia, thank you for the master. What drew you to writing about Henry James? And could you say something about him as a writer and a person, the impact on
Yeah,
his life?
I mean, it's the case with both Henry James and Thomas Mann that I read those books when I was in my late teens.
Mm.
I read The Portrait of a Lady when I was about 19, and then I went on to read all of the other novels. And I thought I understood him, or at least I thought I had the experience of reading him. But with the case of him and Thomas Mann, they both, I suppose, so much was unresolved in their lives. I believed at the time that writing came from entitlement, from power, from ease, and that a writer just felt an urge to, create a story out of a sense of mastery of the material. But I realized slowly that it's the opposite. That you write out of what's not resolved. You write out of fear. You write out of unease. You write out of not being entitled, and that it's not a game for powerful people. It really isn't. And you see that when you read someone's diaries or letters. And the letters of Henry James sometimes are very pompous, but other letters are not. And you can see that as he gets older, he's falling in love with these younger men, and it isn't working. And it's giving him a great sort of loneliness.
Mm.
And at the same time as he's producing these great novels, that the personal thing is bad. And with Thomas Mann, his diaries came out 25 years after his death and make clear that his dreams, he had six children, he was, married, his dreams were homoerotic.
Mm.
His politics were very uncertain, and everything about him was uneasy, as the same with Henry James. So I was working out of the distance between the public self and the private
Mm.
self, between the distance between, I suppose, revelation and concealment. And in his sentences, almost, he's constantly concealing something, or something is about to be said that must be held secret. And there's a constant game in the sentences between what's plain and what's veiled.
Mm. That happens in a Sum of Money, like you mentioned before, the boy that, is a bit of a thief, and, the kind of the face that he presents to his parents and to his schoolmates, and then what he's kind of doing on the side.
Yes, that he has a secret life, and that once the
Yeah.
secret life is exposed, that's the story, the moment when the secret life becomes
Yeah.
exposed. And
Sandrine from Bayside in Melbourne, Australia says, what was it like seeing your novel Brooklyn being made into a film?
well, it was lovely because Saoirse Ronan, if we'd got the finance at the beginning, Saoirse would have been too young. But 2 years, I think, went by, and by that time, she was old enough to do the part. She'd never played an Irish character before, and I did a little part just before she goes into America. There's an Irishman with a cap, and he goes into America. So we got to talk a good bit, and I certainly enjoyed her company. I mean, I loved meeting her. I was
Mm.
sort of starstruck. I was like a backstage guy, and then it was very. I mean, Nick Hornby wrote the screenplay, and it was directed by John Crowley. And in a way, Finola Dwyer, who was a producer, was born in New Zealand, and her parents had come from Ireland about the same year that the novel is set. So she's brought up in New Zealand. I mean, she is a New Zealand person, and she's in London, and her accent's New Zealand, and so there's something at stake for her in telling this story. And so with John Crowley was living in London. He's from Cork. I was always wandering around. And Saoirse was born in America and brought back to Ireland and brought back to America and was living in London, on her own. So all four of us were involved. There was a story that was our story that was being told. It wasn't as though we were making some cowboy movie or adventure movie. This was us,
Mm.
and I think that made a difference.
Mm.
And so yeah, it was the it was shown in Enniscorthy over one night. There were two screenings, and people were amazed seeing their own town because it was filmed in Enniscorthy and set in Enniscorthy. And so that was great. I felt good that night, um, and then there were the Oscars. But I mean, if you're a novelist, they don't want you at the Oscars. They want stars. They want the big, they want Saoirse Ronan and Meryl Streep, and they certainly don't want some sort of bold, aging novelist with no sense of glamour or glitter about him. So I was pushed at the back and stuff.
That's not right.
That was a good lesson in humility.
Um, Alexandra from Otago, New Zealand, actually said she'd love to hear your thoughts on the adaptations of your work. Have you had other work that have been adapted and perhaps not to film, but like the stage
Yeah,
you were
the Blackwater Lightship was made into a film for Hallmark Television, and you can get it still. And that got Angela Lansbury to play the grandmother, and
talking?
it got Diane Weiss, the Woody Allen actress, to play the mother. And it was amazing watching Angela Lansbury in action. Even her arriving on the
Mm,
set, the
mm,
sense of just how she played an Irish woman, and she was basing some of it on her mother, who was Irish. And
mm,
again, you're watching something personal happening. Just the tiny little gesture, the tiny little
mm,
thing that an Irish woman of that generation will do. So that was pretty good. But I've started to write librettos, or in Italian it would be libretti, meaning librettos for operas. And that's amazing to watch something that you've written down being sung by a mezzo soprano.
mm.
Soprano. So yeah, I have two of those opening this year actually. So.
Well, people in London, will that be? Or
No, in Ireland, one of them
okay,
in the Wexford Festival, Wexford
okay.
Opera Festival, the Galway Arts Festival. No,
Yeah.
there'll be an art, which is even better.
People from Ireland listening, or if you're close, get the ferry over and go check that out. The Aldinga Library from South Australia want to say hello. Mark is saying, I am fascinated by your interpretation of writer's block and where your mindset is now. I've recently commenced a journey into AI technology using Copilot. Have you ever contemplated using AI and submitting your writing when you have writer's block to re-scrutinize or re-inject fusion into your work?
I think it would be the opposite almost, that would put you off, because it's some of it's pretty good, and it's like reading something, a sort of shadow version. I put it one day, could they write the opening page of a novel, by me, and they put in a blue lamp. I don't think I've ever had a blue lamp, so it was nice to have a blue lamp in the room, But um, I've written three songs that are going to be performed at Wexford Opera Festival, as well as my opera this year, which is an AI guy who falls in love with the girl that he's written an essay for, and he has to say to her, do you feel what I feel? And she says, well, what do you feel? He said, well, I feel love, like I want you. And she said, you can't feel that. And he says, I do. I know the word love. Um, I feel the word love. I know the word feel. That's what I feel. I feel the word love. And he's a tenor. So it's like a Puccini duet. She says, no, you can't love. I do love. I love you. You don't love. You can't love me. But can I ever love you? Could you ever think of loving me? Is there some part of me you could love? And she says, I have a boyfriend. No, but I feel jealous. So the AI guy, instead of helping her with her essay, he's confusing her totally because he's feeling jealous. She, you can't feel jealous. I do. I know the word jealous. I use the word jealous. When I say jealous, I mean jealous. And so I've written these three songs. They're very, very sad. The whole point is the audience is meant to feel immense pity for this poor AI guy who's locked in his machine. And the girl who just says, like, no, like,
Oh,
no.
yeah. Or you could be
I
like,
wonder
you're
if that
feeling,
starts, if they start loving us. I mean,
yeah.
can you imagine if you one day you're doing the next day starts like they grow and they start coming at you saying, I love you. And no, you don't love me.
Mm. We're going to be very conflicted at that point, that is for sure.
I can see already. I can see you already worrying about that.
Sean here, a dub living in Maynooth. Hope I'm saying that correctly. Firstly, thank you for all the great words. In the story of Free Man, there seems to be a terrific balance between is Joe innocent or guilty? Do you know, or did you know?
He's guilty.
Okay, done. Michael says, do you have plans for another work along the same lines as The Master and the Magician?
No, I don't. It's a pity I don't. I've written small books, but they're books of essays on James Baldwin and on Elizabeth Bishop. But I don't have a third writer who
Mm.
who preoccupies me to the same extent. I can get the same amount of drama from. I mean, I wish I did, but maybe I'll wake up one morning and will have. But I planned those books for years. I
Mm.
knew they were coming, and I
Mm.
don't have anything like that at the moment. I really don't.
Um, Anne says, I'm with Longboy Kilkenny Library. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. And I often see Colm at Kilkenny Arts Festival. When you talked about struggling with openings in your writing, do you ever start further on in the story and then go back to the opening afterwards?
No, it's funny about a novel that I see it as something, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's just, that you if you don't have the beginning right, it won't work, and you have to keep going back to it. And if you get it right, you can leave it for a year or two once you have the opening pages or chapter. With a lot of the novels, I've written an opening chapter and left it for a good while, like a year or two. But no, oddly enough, it's almost like if you're singing a song and you can't really start with the third verse because you don't know how much emotion you've put into the first two. So no, it's a funny business. You really have to start at the beginning.
Hmm. Elaine says, what inspired you to write your third short story collection 16 years after your second collection? And do you feel if you were writing stories set in Ireland, if you were still living in Ireland, and the stories would be very different? And if so, how?
Um, you see, it really isn't 16 years in the sense that I had been writing them regularly. So of those nine, one or two of them were really written 10,
Mm,
12 years ago. So it isn't as though I waited 16 years, just I had the stories and then finally, when there were enough of them, I
mm,
collected them. It's really hard to know the what if because I wander back in and out of Ireland all the time. Before I go to bed every night, I read the Irish Times. So I'm full, like the minutiae. Like if I'm on the phone with an Irish friend, I've been following the day's news as closely as she has. So you have a sense somehow that my voice, once I open my mouth, I'm Irish, that it's hard to judge what you would do if you were there all the time. But the wandering in and out has given me a sort of subject that I didn't plan. And I'm sort of tentative about. But it's hard to know all this what if, you know,
Mm.
like would the stories be in a way more about disappointment or happier? I don't know.
Mm. Darren says, I loved your short stories, particularly Barton Springs and Sleep. And I wanted to also ask you, was it difficult to marginalize and vilify Tony in Long Island, who seems so promising to me in Brooklyn?
Yeah, but I mean, some people are very judgmental. I mean, in other words, I, God made adultery so we could have novels. In other words, there's no novel unless Tony does that. We can't have a novel, and I feel sort of. I feel,
Such a
but the other,
naughty, such a naughty boy, seriously.
the two stories I mentioned, that you mentioned, Barton Springs and Sleep, are the two first-person singular stories. I, rather than he, she. And they're both
Yeah,
personal and they're both more or less autobiographical.
oh, so you did do a road trip around Austin, Texas.
Yeah, you see, I lived in Austin. And I
Right.
used to go to Palm Springs, and
So
I am that guy in the men's dressing room ogling that. The other one, I did do that hypnosis. I mean, that hypnosis did occur. That's exactly what happened.
okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a really sad sort of story because the partner wants him to get help
Yeah,
for himself, but he
yeah,
won't. And it's so frustrating. And the ending of that is just that's one of the most impactful endings when he kind of is back on his own. Yeah,
yeah,
it just hits you. Um, yeah. You have an incredible memory, Colm. Like
yeah,
for someone in your later
yeah,
years, your memory of things that are in your 20, like it's
yeah.
extraordinary.
Yeah,
That
it's bad. Yeah, it's
that's an
bad in the sense
absolute,
that I there's so many things I have a very clear memory of that happened in the past.
that's a
Um,
superpower for sure.
yeah.
Deirdre says, I'm from Grange Library. Just wondering if Colm ever thought about writing about the experience of an immigrant or foreigner in Ireland, as you often concentrate on the experience of Irish people abroad.
Yeah, there is a story that the last long story in The Empty Family are about Pakistanis in Barcelona. Um, but part of the origin of Brooklyn was going to a nursing home where my aunt was, and being wandering in there late at night. There was sort of an emergency, and I came up quite late, and realizing that the only nurse on call, well, the only nurse there all night was Lithuanian, and it struck me that an Irish nurse probably wouldn't be willing to do that work of being there on her own all night. I felt the woman was very sad. Or maybe she was just tired. Maybe I was over imagining, but she just looked sad and tired. And the guys working in the supermarket at the cash register were, I don't know where they were from, but there was a sense of them everywhere you went. You were watching people who were doing work that Irish people necessarily wouldn't easily do anymore. And I felt they were offering us a great. I felt they were offering us a great service. I felt Dublin needed to become a much more cosmopolitan city. I thought there was an energy coming in from outside, and I was really shocked at the demonization of these people. That they were somehow coming to take something from us. It isn't
Mm,
something that everyone in Ireland feels, but there's a small movement, as there is in every country
mm,
now, suggests that migrants are the problem. But I was interested in on a personal level. What's it like for you? What would it be like for you if you went to America? What would it be like for your mother, your aunt?
mm,
And so part of the impulse of writing Brooklyn was that people were coming to Ireland
mm,
and on their own, young women trying to find a new life, people from Nigeria or China or Poland. And I thought, just to imagine what it was like for one of us to go to America. But
mm,
part of the problem now that it's become this word appropriation, that for me to appropriate, for example, if I pretended I was a Nigerian in Dublin, it'd be much better to let the Nigerian tell that story,
mm. Great point.
and to create space whereby someone like Roddy Doyle in Ireland has created a group called Fighting Words, where migrants coming in get to tell their stories rather than having an Irish writer trying to imagine what it's like to be Chinese in Dublin. You get
Mm,
a Chinese person to describe it for you, and I can see the truth in that. I can see that the entitlement I might feel to write about being Polish in Ireland is
mm.
something that I might keep in check.
Um, Charm says, great name, is an Australian living in Ireland. She's just spent 6 months in Kilmacreage. Having written about
Kilmuckridge. Oh,
Kilmipridge, yeah.
great. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
having written about writers using their archive, do you have a plan for your research and writing archive? I can only imagine how rich that collection would be.
There's a whole lot of stuff in the National Library in Dublin, but that's only up to, I think, 2005. So the last 20 years. But also, yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff. You don't know what to do with it. It looks like you could maybe throw it all out someday. But and also the whole question of emails as to how just emails tend to be pretty boring, and there are very few letters. I mean, who writes a letter anymore and goes to the post office?
I know the old pen pals. Yeah, the
Yeah,
young people don't know that pleasure of
yeah,
getting that
yeah,
in the mailbox.
yeah.
Final question before we move on to the hot seat challenge. Look, there are so many questions here, and I apologize for those that we're not going to get around time to. And it's been great to see that people have been listening from all over globally, just together as a community, which is beautiful. Linda says, "What are the chances of a third novel continuing Ailish's story?"
I don't know. I haven't got it. I'm talking back with that idea that the full rhythm, the whole story ready to go. And that often takes a decade, to work it out. And I'm old, I'm 71. So I don't know what I'm going to do about that.
Mm. I have to get this. Petrina says, "Great cover of news from
Oh
Dublin."
yeah. Oh yes, good. Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
you choose that photo?
I did, yeah, I did. Yeah.
Oh, is it someone you know, or is it just a random
I know,
photo?
no, it's an archive photo.
Yeah,
So you just
right.
keep looking around, looking for anything news, newspaper, and so you get that, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, we are now up to the hot seat challenge, and it's been great to hear authors respond to these same questions and see if we might get to know a little bit more of you. So I know that you are waiting with bated breath. We will try and get
Oh,
through
yeah.
as many as we can. Are you a morning person or night owl?
Both.
Okay. You had your bets. Listening, what's your favorite place to write?
I'm in a corner facing the wall, doesn't matter where.
Do you listen to music or silence when you write?
Silence.
Do you write using pen and paper or do you type on a PC or typewriter?
Pen and paper.
Still time. Do you think that does something to your work?
I don't know. I like it. I like making the letters.
Yeah, yeah. Favorite drink while writing, and is it different afterwards?
I don't drink alcohol, so I haven't had an alcoholic drink for 8 years.
But you're a
So
coffee drinker, maybe?
fizzy. No, no coffee. No, no.
Oh,
Fizzy water.
fizzy water. Yeah, same. I don't like plain water. I like mineral water. Favorite book you loved as a child?
Not really. I didn't really read children's stuff when I was growing up, so I don't really have that.
Hmm. Book you return to again and again?
Portrait of a Lady, Kafka's The Trial, Hemingway's Sun Also Rises, and I could go on and on and on.
Yeah. Um, the first person you show your completed first draft to?
And my friend Katrina Crow would see everything I do. I would send stuff to her. There's another friend, Ed Mulhall. Ed sees everything. Once they're typed, once they're in chapter form, my agent, Peter Strauss, Peter would see everything like that too. Yeah, I have a good few people who I would show things to.
That's great. What is your snack of choice while you're writing? Are you more a savory or sweet person?
Oh, chocolate, it's a bad business, chocolate.
It's such a bad business. Yeah. Hopefully not lab created. 10, prefer to visit the future or the past, would you?
Pass.
Any particular time period?
1950s.
Oh, nice. Exactly where one of these stories goes right back to. Favorite book to screen or stage adaptation, not of your own work?
Oh, I suppose John Huston. I mean, really, a good number of John Huston films, the James Joyce's The Dead or Flannery O'Connor's Wise Blood, that there are a few good Huston adaptations. There's also Bertolucci's version of, Visconti's version of Bertolucci? No, Visconti's version of The Leopard.
Okay. Wow. Didn't even know that was Tony.
Yeah, it's absolutely marvelous. It's Burt Lancaster,
Okay.
Claudia Cardinale, um, Alain Delon, a film called The Leopard. It's
Okay.
based on a novel by a guy called Lampedusa, um, but it's a sensationally good novel. It has the great phrase in it. We need to we need to make great changes so that everything can stay the same.
Like it. Like it. Burt Lancaster, he's got a lot of charisma. What's your favorite smell?
Coffee,
Oh,
although I don't
you
drink it.
don't drink coffee.
Yeah, but there's a lovely, isn't there? If you're
Yeah, oh, it's
passing
a beautiful
a cup
aroma.
of coffee. Yeah.
Particularly in Melbourne, I have to say we are the coffee capital.
Yeah, Australia's been good. New Zealand is also, Wellington is a really good coffee city.
Okay, all right. Shout out to all the Wellington people listening today. What is a sound or noise that you love?
Cello.
Oh, massive fan. Yeah, I learnt the saxophone, but my heart is with the cello. What is a sound or noise you hate?
Huh. Electric guitar. No, I don't know. I don't know. I know there's nothing really.
Okay.
I
Are
was
you?
going to say electric guitar.
It's in a lot of music.
Yeah.
It's pulling a lot of music out. Are you a collector of anything?
Yeah, I know I am. I'm a book. I have a lot of books, and
Okay.
I have a lot of CDs, and there's a certain generation of Irish painters that I tried to just get small things by when I could, and yeah, I'm a bit of a problem.
It's a weakness. Okay. Well, that's all right.
Yeah.
We all need, can't be good at everything. Who was your childhood celebrity crush?
Oh, yeah, I suppose the Beatles rather than the Stones, and maybe Paul McCartney, George Harrison. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, well, hopefully no electric guitars. What superpower would you love to have? Because we know you already have the superpower of an excellent memory. So what superpower would you love to
Oh,
have?
I'd love to be able to sing properly.
Okay. Yep. What skill do you have that might surprise us?
No, I boasted about everything I have. There's nothing under a bush. There's nothing lying there. There's no
Yeah,
chance.
you're an
Yeah.
open book. Okay.
I know this is open book. I boast.
Okay. What's your bucket list travel destination?
What's that?
What's your bucket list travel destination?
What do you mean?
Like, where would you love to travel in the world that you haven't been to yet? Like a,
Oh, I'd
tick it
love
off
to
the
go
bucket
to
list.
it. I'd love to go to St. Petersburg in a time after Putin.
Oh, yeah, wow.
I'd love to see those streets in a time of freedom.
Mm, I've always wanted to get that railway. I don't know if I
Mm.
get the chance. And the final question, if you could be one of your characters for a day from any of your books, who would you love to be for a day?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe, maybe Jim in that summer of Long Island when he's has these two women who are crazy about him, and he just doesn't
Yeah,
know what. I mean, that must have felt good for a while.
for a while until his life becomes something else, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, you have passed the hot seat challenge, Colm. You can tick that off your bucket list.
Well, thank you very much.
I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. We've come to the end. That hour is just sped on by. I want to thank everyone for watching and for your brilliant questions. I know there were plenty more that we couldn't get through. I want to thank my colleague Cassie, who was working on the tech behind the scenes. And just a reminder that you can watch this interview on our YouTube channel in about 2 weeks. And don't forget to ask your library about future events. We've got David Baldacci coming up on the 21st of July. And then in September, we've got Matt Haig of the Midnight Train fame, who we will be speaking to as well. But most of all, I just want to say it's been just such a pleasure talking to you about writing, Colm, and just to hear about your thoughts around the process of writing and just what these books have kind of meant to us. It's been really good for me to share that as well.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Colm. Thank you. And everyone have a good evening and a good night or a good morning. Thank you.